Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neurocracy, the podcast where neuroscience meets the real world. In this episode, I, Sanjay, will be role playing as a sleep medicine physician, and all three of us read books. And my two guests on the show had some questions about their sleep and how it relates to their own lives, as well as the books they read. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi, my name's Gabe Fields, and I read the Hunger Games, and I just had some questions for Dr. Otteretti about how sleep relates to my books and the tributes in the arena and their experiences.
I'm Brielle DeRusso. I read Dracula, and I had some questions about how vampires are affected by sleep and how discussions about the importance of sleep are discussed in this book.
Well, I'm excited to see where our discussion takes us.
This episode is brought to you by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. If you or a loved one has ever found themselves reading a novel at 2 in the morning, they recommend you go to sleep. You can read later, but you won't be able to recover your sleep.
So, Gabe, you have some questions for me, I hear?
Yeah, so after reading the Hunger Games, I noticed how the tributes kind of they treated sleep more as a threat, since obviously when they were sleeping in the arena, it exposed them to attacks from other players that were trying to kill them. And so this resulted in all the tributes being extremely sleep deprived, but they were still able to function. And so I'm kind of wondering, as the neuroscientist, if you could tell me what is the science behind this? And how does stress factor into how much sleep people need? And then in relation to things like, how does adrenaline maybe influence the tributes in the arena and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I think one of the things to really take into consideration here is that you can be very sleep deprived before you start to see an effect on your cognitive function or your physical function. And as I was reading my book, I think in general about like maybe 2 or 3 days of severe sleep deprivation where you're not getting 0 hours of sleep, but rather maybe like 3 to 4. So like that would be two sleep cycles if they're each 90 minutes, as they are for a typical
Okay.
person. Um, you won't see as many effects. And if you could clarify here a little bit, so how many days would this like game in the Hunger Games be? And I understand there's like this aspect of a player dying, perhaps. So how many like days do you think this
hmm
goes on? Because that actually creates this kind of like there's different levels to answering this question based on how many days you might need to survive for.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how many days they're in the arena. I could actually look it up if you want
Okay,
me
yeah,
to,
yeah.
if
And
you have
as you look it
additional
up, I'll just
questions.
like keep explaining it a little more. But there is like this idea that you can separate the amount of sleep that you would like physically need to be fully functional, and then based on like other factors, for example, like stress and survival here,
Yeah.
which is ultimately like the core motivation for your body, right? Like to survive and reproduce eventually. That's like what evolution is about. So when you think about this sort of scenario where you're in the Hunger Games and your life is being threatened, your need for sleep will decrease. And that adrenaline goes into like the same areas in your
Yeah.
brain that control your sleep, and it will keep you awake because it's such a core driver and core motivation for you. Because your need for survival is ultimately more
Okay.
important in that moment than long-term health. So, and obviously, like if the games
Yeah.
say
Okay.
lasted for
That makes sense.
months, you would probably see like long-term like health problems come in. But that's kind of like some information on this.
Okay.
And you know what? It's funny that you mentioned this question
Uh,
because I have a colleague at Harvard Medical School who's an expert on this topic. So let me actually confer with her real quick and let's see what she has to say about this. Games about how players should manage their sleep or maybe be aware of how their lack of sleep might affect their behaviors through the game and being able to make decisions when their lives are at stake.
Your need for sleep can be separated from your feeling of sleepiness, which is something that people don't necessarily get.
So, Gabe, do you have any other questions about this topic?
yeah. Just one more thing. That was some great information. Thank you. The other one thing I was wondering is kind of more of a creative question. So if you had to give advice to a player on sleep in the arena, like one thing that you think would be key to their survival, what would that be?
Okay. So, I think I kind of mentioned this earlier, but people tend to sleep in 90-minute sleep cycles as they're elaborated on in my book, Why We Sleep. And one of the things that the author actually mentions is that if you need to wake up at a specific time of the day, you can try to be smart about this and calculate or try to estimate roughly when you will fall asleep, and then try to wake up at a time that's in 90-minute increment from when you're sleeping. So let's do a little bit of math here. Let's say it's like 9:50 and you need to wake up roughly around like let's say 6 or 7. And so what you would do in this particular scenario is it's 10 p.m., right? So what you do is you'd add 90-minute increments to that 10 p.m. So 90 minutes from 10 p.m. is
11:30.
yeah, you'd go
11:30.
11:30 and then let's see like the next one
1,
1 and then
and then
3:30
2:30.
or the 3:30.
2:30.
Wait, 2:30. Oh, good call. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Thank
So
you, doctor.
2:30 and then 4, 5:30 and then 7, right? So 7 would be like a nice time to wake up. And what's the issue right
Yeah.
now with waking up with 6? The thing is, in between these sleep cycles, you have stages of REM sleep where you might be in an intense dream. And if your alarm clock wakes you up out of this dream, you're going to be really groggy. And there's something called sleep inertia, which is also explained in my book. But when you wake up in the middle of a dream, your body's still in that sleep paralysis mode or like sleep inertia. So it'll be really hard for you to get up out of bed and kind of force yourself to wake up. Instead, if you wake up at the end of a sleep cycle, you'll wake up feeling refreshed. And this is especially important for the players in Hunger Games because being at the top of their mental and physical game is ultimately going to give them that tiny edge that might allow them to survive longer. So,
Okay, cool.
yeah. Um, any other questions about Hunger Games or?
Um, I mean, maybe just I was wondering, so obviously the reason that these tributes, keep each other awake and try not to sleep is out of fear.
Yeah.
Can fear factor into how someone sleeps, like once they're actually asleep? Like, is your brain still consciously thinking about that threat
Yeah, yeah,
while
yeah.
it's asleep?
So, and I know we talked about this idea of the fear being like very deep here because it's kind of coming to this core idea of survival, right? And
Yeah.
there's a concept called hypervigilance, which basically causes the brain to push into lighter stages of sleep because this fear is almost like encompassing your entire brain, right? Like the fear is the only thing you can think about. And I'm telling you, like if I were a player in this game, for example, like I would constantly be scared of like who's behind that bush or
Hmm.
who's right behind me right now. Like you're constantly aware. And this is a survival mechanism, right? Because having this sort of like on edge mentality could be what keeps you alive, right? So, and how this relates to sleep is that what happens is, as I mentioned just now, the REM stages of sleep, they're cut down. And I'm sure you can kind of like start to see
Okay.
why. Because in REM sleep,
Yeah.
you're in that heavy, deep sleep and you're dreaming, right? Like if someone wakes you up in REM sleep, it's gonna take you a minute to wake up and be alert. So that wouldn't be ideal. Let's say someone's attacking you and you wake up out of REM sleep, right? You're going to almost like not be aware of what's happening. And that crucial moment could be what causes you to die, right? So that's why, I guess, evolutionarily speaking, this could apply to animals and humans, like a long time ago, when like people were sleeping like outdoors and like tents and like civilization was more like hunter-gatherer lifestyle. That's why, like, I think evolutionarily, this sort of idea of stress causing lighter sleep and less REM has occurred. And I think it's interesting how it connects to the Hunger Games as well. So, yeah.
Um, okay.
So, did you have any questions?
Yeah. I have two questions. First, I was wondering, are you saying that like lighter REM sleep is like beneficial to people in the Hunger Games, that they're not in that deep sleep where they're harder to wake up? Just thought that
Okay.
was interesting.
So REM sleep is actually very important in the long term. And that's why like the brain is able to make the sacrifice in the short term where REM sleep can be cut down so that they're less likely to die during their REM sleep, right? Because not going to be as alert or aware of their surroundings. And I think what's so interesting about your book, actually, in Dracula, is how the fear can potentially like cause nightmares or vivid dreams. And this is kind of a different kind of fear where it's more almost like let's think of it like PTSD as opposed to fear in real time, which is what the Hunger Games is kind of is. And I think in Dracula or like vampires in general, victims tend to have like this sort of uh, like bad memories, right, of being bitten by vampires. And
Yeah.
this fear can almost like manifest in a REM sleep. So there's this concept called threat reprocessing in my book, which is elaborated on. But basically, people often get like these vivid dreams or nightmares in their REM sleep that repeat like similar
Mm.
themes to how maybe they were attacked. And what's happening here is like the brain is trying to finish the danger that reality still hasn't given them closure on. So yeah, like chronic fear definitely can cause like nightmares in REM sleep. And the important distinction here is that in the Hunger Games, the fear is happening in the moment. So the REM sleep actually is not going to be beneficial for your survival. But in terms of like the aftermath, so like let's say maybe, and Gabe, you can kind of help me out here. I think let's say after the Hunger Games, even if you were a survivor, you've seen death, like you've experienced that fear. Do the characters like experience some sort of like nightmares or like,
Yeah, so on the train ride back after Katniss survives and wins the Hunger Games, she has like a nightmares and almost like her own version of like instant like PTSD of just like her
yeah,
time in the arena. And so yeah, I mean I can definitely see how that fear factors in and influences how they dream and just like the rest of their
yeah,
life after that.
yeah. It's so interesting like seeing these connections across the book. So that's
Yeah,
what I
it's
think.
very cool.
Any other
Yeah.
questions about Dracula?
Yeah, for sure. So, another general question I had about
Okay.
vampires is how they're insomniacs because they're like
Yeah.
they are awake during the night and then they sleep during
Yeah.
the day to avoid the sun's harmful rays. So is it even possible for a human to follow
Yeah.
this
And
cycle
I
of life?
think the first thing that comes to mind when you say this question is the idea of night shifts, right? So can humans like
Yeah.
really and that's the bigger question here that what you're alluding to in this book is can humans like adapt to night shifts? And the answer is they can to an extent, but it's not perfect. And and that's why it's so funny, right? Because Dracula is basically representing something that's a real like scenario and like people try to adapt to night shifts and obviously there's reasons for that. There's certain types of jobs that it would be beneficial if people were working on something all day. And the reason that people can adapt to this is you have to understand there's something called chronotypes in circadian biology. And there's really like two extremes of this. And one is the morning lark and the other is the night owl. So I guess I can ask both of you. Do you guys feel like you function better early in the morning or late at night? Like in terms of productivity or just like alertness in general?
I think I personally work better early in the morning. I just feel more productive and more
Okay.
awake. At night, I don't have a lot of motivation. But yeah.
Okay. What about you, Gabe?
Yeah, me too. I mean, like not directly when I wake up, but I think
Oh
yeah, I
yeah,
do my
yeah.
best work in the
Yeah.
morning when I'm fresh
And
and have
part
less
of that, like,
distractions.
I like how you said not directly when you wake up, because part of that comes down to sleep inertia I was
Yeah.
mentioning earlier. And the interesting thing here is that for me personally, I function better like late at night. I get a lot more work done. I'm in like a flow state. And the reason that all of us are different, and I'm sure you two are different again, like within that characteristic or that like chronotype of being a morning lark, is that like genetics ultimately play a role in this. And there's very many
Okay.
extremes when it comes down to this. And that's why some people are biologically more optimized for shifting toward a night shift. They might have genes that allow them to be more flexible with their sleep schedule. And yeah, and I'm sure like in school too, like you can see sometimes like people might be like falling asleep in first period. And that's not, and that obviously comes to the question of
Hmm.
like early school start times, which is this whole other discussion. But still, it comes down to the fact that everyone has different biology. And the funny thing is, I think Dracula also has his own biology. And that's probably why he has his flipped sleep schedule. And and yeah, everyone's just different at the end of the day. So
Yeah. Yeah, to expand on that, I think Dracula is interesting because like to expand talk more about Dracula, but they're not even like sleeping at night. They're like dead at night. Like vampires don't
yeah.
even really sleep. They just like die. Which I think is interesting
Yeah.
because when Dracula kills or like drains the life out of like literally like sucking her blood, she doesn't even really die. She just like goes to sleep, and in her sleep they like think she's dead. And so I just wondered if you could talk more about that. Like, I guess I don't really know what my question is, but how
Yeah.
like that I don't know, just that like flipping from like how like not yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think time is probably the biggest thing here. Like if you try to do it, like let's say for a few days, where like someone like tries to flip their sleep schedule like a vampire, like I think in the first few days there'll be a lot of like pushback by your own body, but over time, if you can kind of like figure out a way to which your body starts to acclimate, that is like I think something that's possible and something we see in society, especially when you see someone like who's working a night shift, and that's why it's so hard to like switch from a night shift to a morning shift, for instance. And I think the best real world example of this is jet lag, because you're basically shifting time
Yeah,
zones.
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you can think like of like shifting from morning to night. And obviously it's not as extreme as that, but jet lag is definitely somewhere that this is applicable. And it's unfortunately a problem that affects some people who have to travel a lot. And first example that comes to my mind is professional athletes who are traveling a lot for games. And this has been seen to affect their performance in games. So it's definitely important for them to be aware of their sleep and how to optimally use strategies that can help them navigate that like idea of jet lag. And one thing that's mentioned in my book actually is this idea that people can acclimate to about a 1 hour change in time zone each night. So that's a strategy some teams use to where if they have a game that's, let's say, in a time zone that's 2 hours away, taking 2 nights to go there will actually allow your body to sort of adjust in a way. And this also ties back to what I was saying earlier about time being such a crucial factor and how your body can adapt to this change.
Cool. So
Cool.
across both of our stories, The Hunger Games and Dracula, what is the biggest misunderstanding you think people have when it comes to how sleep actually works?
Yeah, and this is such a like good question because it's so broad, and I think it comes down to reality versus fantasy. And I think we can all agree here that in like movies and books and shows in general, characters often have this unreal like willpower. Like let's say in your book, Gabe, like Katniss can turn into like a machine that doesn't like it. Obviously, the movies like it doesn't really benefit them to show characters like or to depict how much they truly sleep. But I mean, it comes across as if like they barely sleep and they're just fully functional and like in the perfect world. And Dracula can just act like it's perfectly normal to flip his sleep schedule like really quickly. And obviously, like once again, like coming back to this idea of time, like it's not that easy to just control your body at your will. Um, the body is ultimately like a very delicate instrument and it can do so many cool things after like so many years of evolution, but it's important to realize like what truly like needs to happen in order for your body to like be able to make these changes. And in real life, like danger doesn't erase the need for sleep. You'll still fall asleep and you'll still feel tired. And I think it's important to always like keep in mind like in these movies and books that we read and continue to read later that it's not always like reality. I think as a reader, I don't think it's as fun to read about someone sleeping all the time. I think it's interesting to see the action. So yeah, okay. It's
Yeah.
always important to understand like and distinguish between fantasy and reality. Do you guys feel like I've answered your questions now?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, yeah. Feel free to come back if
Yeah,
you
that
read
was
any more
great.
books.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, that's good. I hope it helps you guys navigate your own
All right.
sleep in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode on Neurocracy. If you enjoyed our discussion, make sure to follow us and stay updated. And don't be afraid to send in your sleep questions that keep you up at night, no matter how strange you think they might be. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine is driven to improve awareness on sleep and its importance. Also, if you fell asleep during the podcast, don't worry, that's completely fine. Unlike most podcasters, we are happy when we're able to help people become healthier.
Good night.
And sweet dreams.